So, facial nerve, it is the nerve of second pharyngeal arch. Then let's talk about the functional components of facial nerve. Okay, this is special visceral efferent. You have to just remember the term pharyngeal apparatus for special visceral. So special visceral efferent, it is otherwise called brachiomotor. That means the nerve supplies the muscles of face, that is muscles developed from the pharyngeal apparatus. Now special visceral, again special visceral efferent. So it takes the efferent sensation from the organ developed from the pharyngeal apparatus. Here it is tongue. Coming to general visceral, for general visceral just remember the term parasympathetic. So general visceral efferent, it carries the fibers to the glands, that is secretomotor fibers. General visceral efferent carries the sensation from the above mentioned parasympathetic glands. This facial nerve also carries sensation from the body wall, a few fibers of the facial nerve along with the vagus. So from the body wall is soma, so here general somatic efferent. Now what are the nuclei related to these functional components? For brachiomotor, it is motor nucleus of facial nerve, and special visceral efferent from the tongue, anterior two-third of tongue. The nucleus involved is nucleus of tractus solitarius for taste sensation, and general visceral, that is parasympathetic. What are the glands related to facial nerve? It is salivary gland and lacrimal gland. So superior salivatory nucleus and lacrimatory nucleus. So in this parasympathetic pathway, two ganglions are involved, pterygopalatine and submandibular ganglion. Now, where these nuclei are present in the brainstem? It is present in the pons. Let's take a glance on all the cranial nerve nucleus location. For that we should know the parts of brainstem. We have medulla oblongata. Above medulla is pons. Above pons is midbrain. That midline is the basilar sulcus of the pons. And this is cerebral peduncle, which connects cerebrum to the brainstem. And this is optic chiasma and optic tract, which forms the anterior and anterolateral boundary of interpeduncular fossa. So these mammillary body and posterior perforating substance and stalk of the pituitary, these are the contents of interpeduncular fossa. Moving on to cranial nerves. First nerve is not in the brainstem. First nerve nucleus is just present above in the olfactory sulcus. Next is your optic nerve. Third is oculomotor, which is a content of interpeduncular fossa. And only cranial nerve from the dorsum is trochlear nerve. That is fourth cranial nerve. The fifth trigeminal nerve nucleus is present in the pons. Sixth abducens, seventh facial, eighth vestibulocochlear. They are present at the pontomedullary junction. 9, 10, 11 present in the posterolateral sulcus of medulla, and 12 hypoglossal present in the anterolateral sulcus of medulla, which is between pyramid and olive. To go in detail about the facial nerve nucleus, let's take a cross section in the pons. So this is below is the anterior surface of pons with your basilar sulcus. Above is the posterior surface of pons, which forms the floor of the fourth ventricle. Okay, this is anterior and above is posterior. So these are the corticopontine fibers, transverse fibers or longitudinal fibers. Now let's draw the facial nerve nucleus. So this is our motor nucleus of facial nerve. Just above that you have abducent nucleus, and the sensory nucleus or lacrimatory, superior salivatory, nucleus of tractus solitarius. Now what happens, and you also have spinal nucleus of trigeminal nerve. Yes, that is the spinal nucleus. Now the fibers of facial nerve winds around the abducent to form a bulge in the posterior part, that is in the floor of the fourth ventricle, and that bulge is called facial colliculus. Let's take a look on facial colliculus in the floor of the fourth ventricle. Yes, that is facial colliculus in the floor. Let's talk about neurobiotaxis, that is shift of nerve cells towards the region of maximum stimulation. That is called neurobiotaxis. Now, during early embryogenesis, motor nucleus of facial nerve initially present dorsolateral to the abducent nucleus. Later what happens, the nucleus comes dorsally and it takes a position ventromedial to abducent nucleus in close proximity to spinal nucleus of trigeminal nerve, where it gets the maximum stimulation. By establishing this position, they get quick reflex response, and this is called neurobiotaxis of facial nerve, that is migration of nerve cells towards the region of maximum stimulation. Okay, let's move on to the course and relations of facial nerve. So this is lateral view of pons and medulla. Here it is the motor fibers of facial nerve emerging at the pontomedullary junction. And these are the sensory fibers from superior lacrimatory salivatory nucleus of tractus solitarius. At the pontomedullary junction, one more cranial nerve emerges along with the facial nerve, which is vestibulocochlear nerve. It enters the internal acoustic meatus and the petrous temporal bone. Now in the internal acoustic meatus, the facial nerve is separated from the vestibulocochlear by the sensory part of facial nerve. Okay, motor part and vestibulocochlear is separated by the sensory part of facial nerve. At the fundus or the bottom of the internal acoustic meatus, the sensory and the motor part fuses to form trunk. And what happens, let's take a close look on the fundus of internal acoustic meatus. This is divided into horizontal crust or falciform crust and vertical crust or Bill's bore into 4 quadrants. In the anterior and superior quadrant is the facial canal or fallopian canal, posterior superior and posterior inferiorly superior and inferior vestibular area. Anterior inferior quadrant is the cochlear area. That's enough. Okay, now the facial canal passes into the internal acoustic meatus, reaches the bottom and enters the internal ear. What are the parts of internal ear? Anteriorly you have cochlea, posteriorly semicircular canal, and in the middle vestibule. So the first part of facial nerve, it just runs laterally and above the vestibule of the internal ear. Later it turns posteriorly in the medial wall of the middle ear cavity. So this is the middle ear cavity with 3 ear ossicles, tympanic membrane laterally, and the external auditory canal. Now to know the course and relations of facial nerve from the medial wall of middle ear cavity, let's continue it in next video. Let's start from the medial wall of middle ear from next week. Watch part 2 for continuation. Thank you.